Hi guys, Ed here from Ultra Team Development, and I wanted to talk today a little bit about something that's been coming up in a lot of advice that's out there in and around conflict management. And one of the things that comes up is this idea of don't get defensive. So when someone criticizes you, or you're in conflict, or someone brings up something, and the advice is don't get defensive. And on the surface, that's great advice. The reality is that you probably will get defensive if it's something that's delivered as a personal attack or something that you hold really dear to you, either based on topic or how something needs to happen. And so, while well-intentioned, that advice can kind of fall flat because what happens in the moment where you're trying to absorb and integrate that advice of don't get defensive, and yet you are feeling defensive in that moment, this can cause a little bit of internal conflict. So suddenly you're sort of pulling against yourself and feeling perhaps other emotional states like maybe guilty or shameful in and around the fact that you are feeling defensive and you're like, well, I shouldn't be feeling defensive. So you're having this cognitive versus emotional tug of war happening internally all in the same moment while you're trying to have some sort of conflict management, or you're actively engaged in a conflict in the moment with someone else. So there's a few things that you can do in this instant when you do feel defensive. And the very first one is just to acknowledge the fact that that's what's going on. So get used to what your defensive stance feels like. If you find that when you get defensive, you get a little bit tight, then recognize that and go, okay, great. And then you can start to at least process the fact that that's what's going on. So recognition is the first real key element here. The second one is start to develop communication skills in and around what causes people to become defensive. And there's a very common one, and it has to do with questioning people's why. And if you find that you do this with other people, you're likely putting them into a defensive stance as well. And it's important for you to recognize that when that happens to you, it's likely a block or a lack of communication skill in the other person because they've asked you a why question as well. So I'll put this very plainly. Let's say I really like chocolate ice cream, which I do, and someone says to me, hey Ed, why do you like chocolate ice cream? I'm suddenly like, there's a high possibility here that I'm going to feel like I'm on trial. Like I have to infer, well, do you not like chocolate ice cream? Why are you questioning my like of chocolate ice cream? And so instantly it becomes this thing where I have to defend my position. I have to defend the fact that, yeah, I like chocolate ice cream. So when you have that desire to ask someone about whether they like chocolate ice cream, this is a very sort of like low risk discussion here. As an example, it would be more inclined to say something like, hey, what is it about chocolate ice cream that you like? Suddenly you're coming from a place of curiosity. You're wondering about that person and maybe what matters to them. And it's not attacking their inherent position. So first step is recognize when you're asking why questions to someone else. So let's say you're in a leadership role and you come up to someone and you're like, hey, why is your report late? They're instantly going to start thinking, oh my goodness, how do I answer this? How do I answer this in a way that, but they're going to have a defensive response. So they're going to have this sort of like anxious defensive response. And you created that because you asked why. Whereas if you came up to that same person, that same employee as a leader and said, hey, your report is late. What's causing you some delays on getting these in on time? Immediately, you're looking at solution. You're recognizing the fact that you pointed out that the report is late, and yet you're not making it about them. And so recognize when that happens. So now let's turn this back on you again, where someone does ask you a why question. They say, hey, why is your report late? You know that the likelihood of them wanting ill intent towards you is very low. And therefore, you can take that opportunity to go, oh, okay, well, you know, what is it about the report being late that matters to you? Or, yes, I am falling behind. And you can now process the fact because you understand that they don't have the communication technique or response that you feel that you've developed in yourself by replacing why with what. that's a little quick tip for you here today on conflict management. Find opportunities to summarize. Find opportunities where you are asking why towards people, and see if you can switch it off to a what oriented question. All right, have a great rest of the week. Ciao.